Good? All right. Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm very grateful for the folks who are tuning in. Welcome to our next candidate conversation for Vote ATL. For those of you who I don't have the pleasure to know, for those of you who are sitting at the comfort of your own couch, got the DNC on one camera, this on another. My name is Rohit Malhotra. I'm one of the team members of the Center for Civic Innovation, and I have the pleasure of leading this conversation today. This conversation that we are going to be having today is extremely important because while the entire country is talking about a national election, there is also an election happening right here at home in Atlanta for our city council. Our city council post 3 at large is up for election because a city candidate decided to vacate her seat to run for a different office, and so that seat is now up for election. This is important because at-large positions on the city council represent the entirety of the city. So every single neighborhood, all residents of Atlanta are represented by 3 at-large positions. And there are 5 people who are running to fill that position. And whoever wins that election this November will have to run again, actually, next year for that position again, because next year is once again an election year, which I think is just every year in Atlanta is an election year, which will be our new slogan for this city for the remainder of time. But I'm grateful to have this conversation because the purpose of these one-on-one conversations is to really get to know the candidates, to get to know their background, who they are, why they come to this work, and what their vision is for this city. So we'll cover a variety of different topics. I'll have a conversation with Eshé for about 45 to 60 minutes, and then I will open it up for questions. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. Tweet at us, Facebook at us, Instagram at us, do a TikTok dance and tell us what it is that you want to know. But we'll be able to ask some questions to the candidate as well. And then on October the 3rd, we will be hosting a forum with all of the candidates, and we'll have some stuff planned in between that as well. But we are going to bring attention to this election no matter what. So if you do nothing else, if you're about to tune out, go and tell 5 people that there is an election happening in Atlanta, and then bookmark this so you can come back. We've also already talked to 2 candidates already, so you can check those out on our YouTube channel, which is at Civic Atlanta. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm grateful that you were here with us this evening on Edgewood. It might get a little rowdy in a little bit, but it's a Monday, what are we, Tuesday night, so it should be good. Eshé, I'm going to start with the same question that we've asked every candidate, and in fact anybody that we've ever had in this seat, which is not why you're running for office per se, or what your vision is for Atlanta. We'll get to all of that. But why public service? That's a choice. Where does that come from for you, and why do you choose to do that?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Rohit, and thank you so much for having me for this important conversation. It's extremely important for everyone to know there's a local election on this year's presidential ballot. And for me, public service, start family, my family. I'm born and raised, I always start from where I came from. I'm born and raised here in Atlanta. I grew up in Eastlake, at the corner of Glenwood and 2nd Avenue, and I share this story. My mother was a single mom, raising 4 children of our own and 2 cousins, and we have always just been a family of giving back. The Collins family, that's just who we are, and that's how my mother raised us. No matter whether we had it or not, it was a deep sense of you owe it to your community where you can pour into to do just that. And so I've been engaged in public service as young as 8 years old with my mother, just in the Glenwood community and in the Eastlake area. At that time, we had Eastlake Meadows as the apartment complex, literally 5 steps from us. And so I continue that, that's just been embedded in me, and I continue that work, just my whole trajectory from high school. I went to Druid Hills High School, to Spelman College. I was a Bonner Scholar, just really ingrained into public service, and just wherever I landed or planted myself is how can I make my community better? Yeah. What are the strengths and the skill set and the drive and the love and compassion I just have for people, period, that I can give back no matter where I am. And so for me, that's just been the personal plight for me and my trajectory, no matter where I am, and no matter where I plant my root and plant my seed, I want to be able to always leave that space, place, or person better than how I found it. And I do feel that that is my calling.
Yep. So you're one of four, you said?
I'm one of four.
One of four. Are you, where do you sit on that four?
I am
the youngest, oldest?
I'm the second from the baby.
Okay,
so for about
second from the
10
baby.
years, I have lived the life of being the baby of the family,
Okay.
and then I have a younger sister
Okay.
that came into the picture, and we all are servant leaders, educators,
Yeah.
social workers, counselors. That's who we are.
Are you closer to certain siblings versus others, or just different, or what's the?
No, I have a special. What I do love is it's 3 girls and 1 boy, and then I have two half sisters that are twins. We all have our own special relationship. There is one that I am close to because our lives mirror each other in so many ways. But
Which one is that?
And she is number 4.
Number 4, the youngest, the baby.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so I have a special relationship with each one of my siblings, and I love that because our conversations are different. The perspective that I get from each one of them, I'm able to piece together, like for me, a full picture of understanding. So I love that. So I love them all the same. It just looks different.
Yeah, just a little different. Tell me a little bit about your mother. What were some of the things that, when you think about her and what she instilled into you, like what do you think of?
Thanks for asking that, because oftentimes, and I'm come from a space just as a Black woman, we often get into the conversations of who we are and what we do. And so I appreciate you asking about my mom. My mom is 75 years young. She'll be 75 in November. She is the oldest of 13. And have a labor worker. She retired 34 years out of AT&T here in Atlanta. Labor leadership just really instilled in us the importance of just taking care of people. So she was a labor worker with AT&T. She was the woman that everybody called, and still is. Like, I have to fight and say, leave her alone,
Yeah.
She was the leader and the servant leader that everybody calls and still is.
Why do you think that is? What was it about her that made everyone call her?
One thing my mother had instilled in us is a deep sense of compassion and giving back, and honestly, this connection of you may never meet people, you may never personally know people in this world, but you want to leave the sense of they know that their lives are better or their situation is better because someone gave back.
Yeah.
And that's how she's always been, and it's just been having a compassionate servant heart.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, she used to tell us all the time, and I still do this, at the end of the day, when I go to sleep, before I go to sleep, do I feel that I gave the world my best?
Yeah.
And whether that is through my job, through my relationships with friends and family, through serving, through advocating, through fighting, going to sleep every night just with a restful heart and mind that I gave the world my best that day. And
do you think you have middle child syndrome at all, given that you're in the middle, or is that a thing for you?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
textbook.
Yeah.
Open up the textbook.
Yeah.
As I shared, my mother was the oldest of 13, so
Yeah.
she
So
always.
I'm an older child as well, so I know the responsibility.
Absolutely.
That comes with
So
that.
she came with the responsibility of helping take care of her, younger siblings, and then also raising her own children. And so the middle child, that middle child piece where there's just a different level of independency that comes with the middle child. Absolutely.
Is your brother next after, or is he the eldest?
He's next after.
Okay.
The oldest is my sister Gina.
Okay.
Her name's Regina, and she's like the second mom as an older child. As the oldest would be.
Yeah.
So the middle child piece just comes from, I think, that deep ingrained independency, but. I love it now because it's a full circle moment, because my mom, I think she's just extremely proud to be in these spaces and to kind of see me flourish, where she just took this sense like, Eshé, I knew you were going to be okay. While we were in a neighborhood where she did have to, in fact, lean more to supporting my brother. You know, if my brother was he was in a fork of the road, he could either have won a path of being, staying in education, or he really could have taken a path in the streets. And so, and she was, single mom in that space. So the middle child piece, it was a love of independency and excellence, and that's what she drove.
How would your eldest sibling describe you in high school? What would they say Eshé was like in high school? Not how you would describe yourself. How would your oldest sister describe you?
She would say that I was a go-getting student.
Okay.
You know, she says that now. She was like, I knew where you are now. I knew you would be here.
What a parent thing to say.
Right.
Yeah.
I was a
Perfect. The
parent,
best.
right?
Yeah, just did everything right.
I was really deep in school. I knew education was, was my way out. I was very studious. I was very involved in school. I was very, service oriented. I was in everything, wanted to be in everything and wanted to be a part of everything that I could be. Again, lead my talents in school. And so she would say, and I hear that a lot, like, it doesn't surprise them that I am in this path of advocacy and, and the civil rights.
That's what your older sibling would say. What would your younger sibling say?
She would say she missed cool Eshé.
Okay, all right.
So there's a side of me where, I'm a fan of Jordan 1s, and she lives in Brooklyn. My baby sister is different. She is different than me, but we share the love of music. We share the love of arts. We share the love of festivals.
Okay.
We share the love of sharing each other's playlists. Growing up, she used to steal my CDs, whether it was a Mary J. Blige or a, John Coltrane. So we share that artistic space. She's a true creative.
Okay.
She's hands down a true creative in every sense of the word. And so that's the part that she's excited about once this campaign is over with. Going to New York, we hit up Brooklyn at a cool spot in Harlem. Exactly. So that's what she would say about me, is that side.
So you and I have something in common in that everybody mispronounces our names. So tell me a little bit about what does Eshé mean, and why why were you, did you ever get told why your family chose to give you that name? Is that a given name? Is that
it's interesting. It's interesting. I love this question. So I'm loving this interview. So Eshé is Swahili, which is a African dialect, and the history behind it, most people say it's a French. It's a form of French, but it's actually the other way around. So French being a derivative of Swahili, it means beautiful life. And my mother, when she named me, I also think it was, and I think my mother told me it was a time where it was the revolutionary times of consciousness and understanding, what it means to be Black, and what it means I was born in the early 80s. And so it is a trajectory where my older brother and sisters, they have more, I would say, Americanized common names, and then it is Eshé, and then my baby sister is Zaria, and my cousin that lived with us is Samaria, and then there's Elora, and so there's this lineage of African names from Queens, Nzinga, and just my father feeling that they were in a place of just wanting their children to take on an identity that more aligned with being Black. And
was there something that prompted that? Was there, because that wasn't necessarily with your older siblings, but then something happened?
I think it was the liberation period of the time and the spaces that they were in. during those times. And I just think that, my parents, I just think that my parents at that time was just ingrained in a deeper level of consciousness and understanding who they were and their identity, and wanted their children to, mirror that.
Yeah.
And what I will say about that growing up, because my name was different, I dealt with the pick of it, or it being mispronounced. Yeah, it being mispronounced, and being in a space where you felt that you had to accept, I had to accept it because I didn't know how to handle it as a child. And my middle name is Poin, so you can only imagine when the teacher goes down the roster, she was like, Eshé Poin Collins, what that was. But over years, it is a beautiful life that I have, and a beautiful life that I'm creating, and a beautiful legacy I want to live. Yeah. And so as I've grown into it, I've embraced my name.
Folks can learn Tchaikovsky, they can.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually become more vocal when people do in fact mispronounce it, taking it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Not offended, but hey, it's it's Eshé. So and so I appreciate you.
So for you, you growing up in a household that is, saying, okay, well, we want to connect more to some of the traditions that may be abroad, but then you're in Atlanta. Atlanta has its own set of traditions, its own set of culture, its own set of values. How was it navigating that for you? Was that
Five points. If my mother, when we changed our diet, it was 7 under. When during the holidays, when we wanted to go to a Christmas Carol concert, it was Spelman and Morehouse. When we wanted to go to the art festival, it was the Sweet Auburn Festival or Piedmont Park. So I never felt that I had to choose either or in Atlanta, and that's why I absolutely love my city, and I think that's what make Atlanta, I wouldn't even say unique. I think that's a unicorn. Unicornism, that's a word of Atlanta. You don't have to. You can truly be all of those things.
Did you know that you wanted to stay in Atlanta after high school? Were you like, I'm going to Spelman? Was that on your radar? Were there other people you knew that went to Spelman, or was it? Why Spelman?
We're first college. So my sister, my siblings and I were first generation graduates in our entire family, and so. We started the path of what the importance of higher education was, and my mother knew what that was. She just didn't have the opportunity, and so for me, it was the connectedness of what I just shared, my lived experiences of going to events at Spelman and taking us to see Pearl Collegian. I didn't know who that was, but I was a young girl sitting in a conversation of a book study or a play that Pearl Collegian was doing, and just being around all these amazing leaders in Atlanta. And my mother she had us in tow, because I think that also was a educating, learning space for her. Yeah. And so when I had the opportunity to go to college, and I got into great schools throughout the country, it boiled down to 2 things. I went to a predominantly white, at that time, Drury Hills was a predominantly white high school. I was gifted and talented, so I was in those classes, but I also had this lived experience home of just connectedness and consciousness. And so I knew I wanted to go to a school that embraced that. I didn't know if it was going to be a FAMU Spelman or Howard. Spelman definitely, because I visited and I really loved being around just all women at that time, and not feeling that I had to worry about how I looked and my,
Is that something you worried about in high school?
What high school student doesn't? Worry about, how they.
I was so cool in high school, as you can imagine. No, I totally understand.
Yeah, I just wanted to be in a space where I could bring my.
But I mean, with the experience of being at Drury Hills High School, you just said it's a majority white high school. It's an odd Atlanta experience for a woman named Eshé, right? Yeah. To be in Drury Hills High School. Yeah. What was that? What was your mindset there? Or was it like kind of
comfort? Was it discomfort? Was it, I gotta get out of here, when I go to college, I'm gonna, never experience this again? What?
It was it wasn't necessarily discomfort, to have a real conversation with you, a very real conversation. So this was in the 90s. The Druid Hills is a lot more diverse now. I was a token student. I'll say that, I was a student that, I did well. It was the M2M program, NDCAB at that
What's
time.
that? Explain that.
Minority to majority, so that was pretty much busing. What we know now, it was a busing program. And I was a student that did well. Like I said, I was gifted and talented. I was in the advanced classes, and so there were opportunities that were given to me that weren't given to all other students, other Black and brown students in the school, because I achieved at a certain level. And come with those accolades and come with those celebrations, you feel good in some space, but you also know, like, this is not fair, it's not equitable. The conversation.
What did people say when you went back home? I mean, you go to school, you come back home, a lot of your peers, at least at home, are like, Eshé goes out to, school and then comes back.
I was a smart one that was gonna make it out.
Okay, so that was the picture was, you gotta make it out.
Yeah, I was a smart one, and it was me and my sister, so it just wasn't me. That we were the ones that was gonna, that we were the ones that was.
Did you have a desire to stay there? Was there I don't wanna go, or were you like, yeah, I gotta get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, it was a desire to stay where I grew up in.
Yeah, I mean, you could have went to school, where the neighborhood that you're in, right?
Which was Southside High School,
Okay.
now Mayor Jackson.
Okay, right, so, I mean, a lot of folks who
Yeah.
would say, well, I went to the high school that I was zoned for, I went there. I was also gifted and talented, but, I stuck where, my community was, but you took another path, right?
Mhm.
Is that what impact does that have on your, you just said you thought it was unfair, or why is it unfair? Where does that come from?
Well, so for me, that was a center point for me, seeing what inequity really truly is in education, and I really saw a difference in quality of education that I was receiving versus my friends when I would come home, and it was living two lives, honestly. My mother, as any parent, wanted to make the best decision for her children, and did just that, where we used my grandmother's address to go to school. And so for me, but I recognized that, and I saw that. So going back to the question in terms of my high school experience, I did well, and so with that, there was a swarm of opportunities that was afforded to me, and even then, I would push and share that information with my friends in school, that information wasn't shared with them. So for me, choosing to go to Spelman was one of being in a space of where I could truly be comfortable, be my full self, but also know that I wanted to choose a system of higher ed that was going to prepare me for the world that I had already experienced at a young age. I just did not know how to fully navigate it yet. And so and also Spelman was local. I love my city, and also I was a first generation scholarship kid, so I also there were things that I could afford to attend Spelman versus leaving the state.
So there are folks who, this is one of those cities, and we'll get into this a little bit more a little bit later as well, but this is one of those cities where, Atlanta badges really matter, right? When you come here, it's like, wait, did you go to Doug, or did you go to Mays, did you go here, did you go there? And then it's like, how Atlanta are you, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And do you feel that because of your choice your family's choice to send you there, does that tarnish your Atlanta accolade or credibility?
No.
And because why not? What would you say to someone who says, well, Eshé doesn't, she grew up here but left for school, what does she really understand about Atlanta?
Yeah, so absolutely doesn't tarnish it doesn't tarnish my badge or being from Atlanta. I actually find it offensive, because that's the lives of many children and many of us that grew up in Atlanta. Even if you grew up if you lived in one side of town and you know the infamous story about if you were zoned for South Side and you went to North Atlanta High School. There's a lot of key leaders that have done that. I'll use the example of our, Mayor Bottoms going to Douglas. That wasn't her zone school, but her family wanted her to take advantage of strong programming that was there at the time. So I don't look at that tarnishes me because where my mother chose to send me to get a great education is where I am, where I planted, where I give back, and where I have rooted myself, and where I am growing. And I'm Atlanta through and through. And I think like I said again, I get offended by that conversation because what does that say about those that have moved into the city that also want a better life for themselves, and they make that for their children because they're not from here, or they haven't been here 20 years or whatnot. Doesn't make them any.
It comes a lot of it comes from this. It comes from this interesting point of, or like a place of usually pain, right? Like, or usually anger. Like, it's the not like us argument, right? So it's like you're here, but you don't understand what we've been through. You don't understand what has actually happened here. And I mean, it's an isolating tool for sure, right? I'm not justifying it as a tool, but it is one that people feel very strong when people are running for office, especially.
Yes.
Is how Atlanta are you? Like yes. that is a call.
And I think that's subjective because some people that say, well, how Atlanta are you? They just go by their high school experience, right? And so if I share my high school experience, my Spelman experience, my Georgia State graduate school experience, my teaching in Atlanta public schools in Bowen Homes housing community experience, my, leaving to go to law school to come back to my city, purchasing my home in Southwest Atlanta, advocating as a civil rights attorney here, teaching in this city. My family still live in this city. If I do 20 things, but one thing because my mother, who wanted the best for her child, who had to make a tough decision to send when she had to be at work at 6:30 in the morning, have her fingers crossed that her own kids would get up to go to school and not get hit by a car, not get caught up in gun violence, worrying about my brother not getting caught up in any streets, but sending us on a MARTA bus at 7 a.m. in the morning to go to another school in this city. If that makes me less Atlanta, then I don't, God bless whoever is putting out that narrative, and
it's more of whether there is a threshold of entry into service to Atlanta, right? Is there supposed to be a threshold to entry within there? Is it okay? Well, as long as you put X number of years into it, and then there are some people who would put no time into. They're new to Atlanta, or they may say, okay, well. Let's flip the question, right? Where someone was saying, I'm new to Atlanta, but I love the city, I show up, I volunteer, I do this, I do that, and now I want to run for office, right? Do you think that there is a difference between, do you think that should prohibit somebody from being able to hold office? Or?
No, because it's not for me to determine, it's not for me as an individual person to determine what should, everyone has a right to seek office.
Of course, right.
And this is the people's seat. And none of us are, this is not my seat, this is the people's seat. And what I'm asking for is for people to look at my experience, look at what I bring to the table, look at the work I've been able to get done and decide if they want me to be their employee, employee in this seat. So it's not for me to decide or discriminate or prohibit anyone that lives in this city, whether they want to pursue elected office.
I've learned that in this process, the way to get this as spicy as possible is to question someone's Atlanta accolades as much as possible. Because they wear it, it feels like, all right, let's go. I heard it.
I'm sorry, I'm not a Grady baby. I was born in Crawford Long.
But this is the problem.
And then Atlanta enough.
Look, you don't have to ask me. I will get I think that this is at the core of I think a troubling discourse in Atlanta, which is this questioning of your accolades on whether you are Atlanta enough to hold hold office, and how much of Atlanta you are, right? So I wanted to get legal to call it into question. So you go to Spelman, right? You're among Black excellence at Spelman. That is without question, right? And so there is, there is though, the AUC is also in many ways they're shielded from the Atlanta that exists sometimes, right? Because it's a campus. There's only so much of Atlanta you get to see. Now, what we see is when AUC students actually see Atlanta, they are often the first to raise issue and concern with, wait a second, like, we have this amazing place in the middle of neighborhoods and communities that have been ignored forever, right? So Black excellence surely can't only just be confined to a campus, but there must be Black excellence that should be cultivated outside of that campus as well. What was your relationship to the city outside of your time at Spelman? And did you feel that people at Spelman understood, like, that Atlanta also is, while it has a number of accolades and amazing things, is also facing some of the greatest challenges in this country?
Absolutely. I mean, as Spelman, they embed in you from day one sisterhood and service. So my experience was, I feel that I had a more leg up because I was from here. I was born and raised here. I knew the spaces. And you gotta think about it. I was at Spelman at a time where we were in the middle of university homes. So housing, those communities were still alive and well. Those housing communities were still alive and well. So we walked down, we walked through campuses and still was being able to connect with the residents and the communities that live there. So for me, it wasn't I didn't feel shielded at all. It actually deepened the commitment to serve our community even more.
It's tough being a resident and seeing like millions and millions of dollars being poured into institutions that are right there as you're in your own community, yet your own neighborhood, whether it's my sidewalks or my ability to just be able to get from point A to point B continues to be a challenge. What responsibility do you believe an institution like Spelman has to the community around?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a responsibility of collectivism in all of it, collective action, period. There isn't, so that's why I do feel that there's an issue, that there's a siloed conversation that because all of these funds were invested in this institution, that they're solely responsible for addressing the things that were around. We all have a part in that, and that's why I would share my experience at Spelman, because first of all, a lot of that money helped pay for school, paid 80% of my education.
Of course, yeah.
So it was one of, at the end of the day, we are instilling in you the best education to prepare you for the world that's ahead of you. And when you graduate, when you matriculate through the gates of Spelman, we want you to not only serve your community well, lead your community well, and know that you're prepared. And what I will tell you, I left that school feeling that I was invincible. And that's why I tell any other young woman that thinks about going to Spelman or have these questions, or I don't know if I can afford it, that institution prepared me so well for what waits for me outside of my institution.
How do we embody that invincibility, that feeling of giving people invincibility for the dozens and thousands of young women and young Black women in Atlanta who don't go to Spelman, who can't go to Spelman, who don't have the opportunity to go to Spelman? Is there, if this is a position that you seek, there are going to be a lot of women who say, that's great that your experience was your experience, which is you got to go to a better school than you were zoned into, you took advantage of that, and in the sense of, I didn't mean that with negative connotation, I meant that with that was something that you were able to then say, okay, a gifted person goes to this school, then you go from that school, you go to Spelman, you don't just go to Spelman, you're a Bonner Scholar at Spelman, right? This is very few people in the world have that level of experience. And I think
how can Atlanta, that has this gift, extend that out to the dozens, thousands of young folks who don't have that privilege or experience?
It's exactly what I'm doing, and what I've been doing is pouring back into our children and our communities in those spaces where I can. And I do think it's I know for a fact, it was part of why I ran for the school board and why I joined the school board. Because I did not want a family or any student have to make the decision that I had in my education experience. Everyone should be able to go to their neighborhood school and go to a great school and have those opportunities. Like I said, I was a scholarship kid. My mother could not afford $1 to send us to college, and we were scholarship kids. And I'm not going to discount that. I'm not going to, I'm not going to. It was hard work that went through that. And there was a grit that was instilled in us. And so for me, giving back in that space and using my platform and using the areas where I am is advocating just for that. So the hundreds and thousands of young women and children, period, have opportunity. I am trying to remove those barriers so they have those opportunities to make it easier for them.
How do you get to a point though where the like advancement of and kind of the equity of an educational access, or like the access to these types of things, where the barriers are broken down so much that I don't have to wait for an Eshé Collins who goes to Spelman to decide that they're going to necessarily give back. I would say like Atlanta, this is a core to Atlanta's challenges, is it's often like we have to wait for someone or a group of people, or in our sector it's foundations or rich folks or whatever it might be, to finally decide that now that I got what I wanted, I want to now give back. How do we break the systems so that it's not a trickle down experience for people who are here in Atlanta?
Yeah. So I don't think we have to wait. I think people are choosing to wait first,
Exactly.
Well, so to your point, you said, how do we break a mindset? Make sure I'm understanding your question. You said, how do we break the core where where people are waiting?
Let me say it simply, which is if I'm a kid in Atlanta right now, the average kid in Atlanta is not going to the top school in the city, that doesn't have access to a top grade education. Therefore, it's a trickle down effect, right? Because of all of those reasons, then they likely are not going to college. And if they're not going to college, even if they are going to college, they are likely not going to Spelman. And so oftentimes it is a waiting game for people, especially young folks in Atlanta, to wait and say, okay, like I will get access to those opportunities once someone who has already had those opportunities decides that I can have access to it or opens that door for me. It just seems like a backwards way to think about how we should establish, access and equity for everybody, right? Everybody should have access to a high quality education. You shouldn't have had to be bused from point A to point B. Everybody should be able to feel invincible in Atlanta. It shouldn't be only because you were able to go there, but we know that that's not the case right now. So it's this waiting for someone to give back in order for me to be able to get what you would argue maybe I deserve. That seems like the Atlanta way in a way.
No, I push back. I think that's a backward way of thinking on your end in that regards. And the reason why I push back on it is because of, so I'm just going back, I'm going by for me to be able to be the highest leader that I can, the best person I can to help anyone, I have to be better prepared. I have to be prepared myself.
Sure.
And I'm just talking about me. So I'm just talking about that in space. For me, and I'm going from my perspective, my work, this wasn't a waiting game. I knew a calling. I'm sorry I couldn't articulate that for you at 15 or 16 years old, but I knew a space where I was going to be. And I don't know if it's a spiritual connection, divine intervention, whatever you will label that as. But I don't think it's a waiting game in terms of our children having to wait for someone to say that's a savior complex.
I think that's Atlanta's problem, right? Because my hospital system doesn't get better unless a billionaire decides it's going to get better. My storefront doesn't get economic incentives
unless a billionaire or a major corporation decides that that corridor is interesting enough to do that. I mean, the west side of Atlanta was not getting the investment that it deserved until we decided that it's going to become an entertainment corridor. And then after everybody got pushed out, then we're like, okay, let's trickle down as much as we can, help as many people as we can. That's the reality for a lot of people.
But where can I struggle with that? And I'll push back on you for that. I'll push back on that because you're choosing to give those entities the energy and focus. There are tons of groups, coalition, people, homes, grandmothers, mothers, aunties that has been doing this work for decades.
Sure.
And we have been fighting, and I'm gonna say we have been fighting to be at the table to get a share of the philanthropic dollars to do this work. I can give you a sheet of organizations where people are doing this work out of their pockets. You go on Dolly Holloway, you can go on MLK, you can go down Campbellton Road. I am connected to those small businesses that's been doing this work for decades, and I mean generations. They are third generation in and helping the communities. What people have chosen, I'm gonna push back on you, is a mindset that that's where you get saved. That's where you get saved in those spaces.
Oh, I think it's pure dollars, right? I'm talking about, I mean, look, this is what we do for a living, right? Here, every single day, we've worked with over 150 organizations on the ground in Atlanta that are providing direct services to folks, but those organizations should not have to exist. They exist because of a failure of a system. And that system often is a system that decides winners and losers, particularly when it comes to who gets dollars and who doesn't. When it comes to Black-led organizations in Atlanta, where Black-led organizations are the majority of the organizations that exist, they get a fraction of the development dollars that actually go.
That's what I'm saying.
So I think we're saying the same thing, but I don't know that we are because it doesn't feel like we are.
No, we are what I'm saying. We are what I'm saying, and the example that you just used. What people are choosing to do is run to those billion-dollar corporations or give acknowledgement and shine light to those investments when those investments have been happening at a lower scale, at a smaller scale for a very long time. So I will push back, and that is part of what I'm pushing back in terms of even running for office. How are we supporting the organizations that's been doing this work versus, like to your initial point, waiting for the billion-dollar organization or the billion-dollar investor to come and make this happen.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that this is how development happens in Atlanta. There is a disproportionate amount of dollars that are, I mean,
so you
certainly don't disagree that corporations and wealthy families in Atlanta have a disproportionate impact and decision-making power on what areas of Atlanta get development, what areas of Atlanta get access to resources. There's hopefully not disagreement on that.
Yeah, no.
So if that's true, right? So then my question becomes, and maybe this is what you're getting at, is like, how would you actually switch the way that we do development? Because if we're in agreement that the current way development is done is no disagreement. There are grandmas, organizations, people who are taking care of each other in spite of the fact that they have not received their fair share or fair share.
Mm-hmm.
But what ends up happening is that corporations and large wealthy individuals have a lot of power in decision making on public policy. So what would you do if you're in office? How are you going to balance that power when Corporation X says, look, I'm going to build a massive thing here, and there's nothing you can do about it, Councilmember so-and-so. I'm going to build something there, and then I will establish a little philanthropic fund that will give back to the grandmas and other people. That is development in Atlanta. I can give you example after example after example of that. So what would you do differently? How would you combat that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a city councilman, you have to lean into the voice of that and also think about what legislations and policies that you can put forth to combat that. And
okay, so let's go there. Tell me the legislation
and tell that.
Yep.
First off, when you're talking about your example, the community benefits agreement that you're saying should not be an optional piece and should not be at the second part of the conversation. I'm answering your question. It actually should be leading the conversation. And if you have communities that don't know what that looks like and don't know how to maneuver that, that's why that is why they've elected their leader to do just that. So it will be my responsibility to lead that conversation and make it very forefront that the priority is that our community has to benefit from this agreement, and what does that look, has to benefit from this development, and what does that look like? I also also know I'm one person of many, so I would definitely build coalition and collectively to understand the impact across the board, right? Because there's some development that needs to happen, but it does not have to be, to your point, this massive development that's making it more unaffordable, inaccessible, more inequitable in this city. So how, in my role as city councilwoman, I can lead that conversation and be very unapologetic about it. And part of that goes to my initial, goes back to the initial piece of actually being prepared for this, being prepared and having the experience to do this, and leading with the courage, the courage and the fearlessness to make that happen. Because also, what we also know in Atlanta is that there are people that don't necessarily want to lean into that because they're scared of what they will lose, or the social piece, or whatever that looks like. And so I do think it's important for your city council representatives to do just that.
So what happens when the development that is built on that premise, right? The premise of we are going to offer tax abatements, we're going to offer economic incentive. You're on the board of Invest Atlanta through your position on the Atlanta Public School Board. We offer massive incentives to corporations to build things, and it makes the little $10,000, $20,000 donations to those small businesses look like pennies.
Absolutely.
So when we go and we look at multi-million-dollar investments and tax abatements to these corporations that end up displacing people, that end up not fulfilling the job numbers that they claimed that they were going to do, what is a specific accountability tool that you would push for that would actually make sure that the things that people are getting those incentives to do
I think
I
think it has to be part of the agreement from the initial onset.
But it has been a part of the agreement and it's not happening.
No, it hasn't. It has been a part of. It has been part of it. It has been part of it until to the extent where it has been optional. Now, what I don't
It's
know.
not optional. In actual tax, in a tax agreement, when we offer a tax incentive for a stadium, for a bridge, for anything it might be, the Economic Development Authority of our city provides very specific things that you must do, not optional, that you must do. For example, you must create X number of jobs. You must be able to have this many people from Atlanta in your buildings. I mean, the mayor ran on this platform, right? But then what happens is that the development begins, and then people start getting displaced. The number of jobs that are committed to do not actually get achieved. There's no audit of that. And then from there, what we don't see is more Atlanta people benefiting from that project. We actually see people coming in from the outside to come benefit from that project. You can look at any major development over the past 20 years in Atlanta and point to that reality.
So let me take your example, and let me take the optional part of that. So there is an agreement, and I don't know the exact development, where part of it was that X amount of dollars, X amount of jobs had to be for residents, right? They came back and asked for a revision of that clause because they said the premise was the fact that with this certain level of specialty that there was not enough people in Atlanta specific residents that met that qualification.
Right.
What I'm telling you is at the beginning of any of those conversations, before we even get to that point, we should have already ironed out that conversation. We should have already had that dialogue on the specificity of it, and also ensure that we are monitoring and enforcing. So, because what happens?
It's the enforcement thing that I'm asking you.
Yeah,
How do you enforce it?
you have to
The
regularly.
CPAs are not enforceable.
Rohit, let me answer the question. You have to consistently monitor it, because what has happened, the enforceability piece is coming down the line when the project is at such a critical point that it's like you have to make a decision right now. But if your city government, your city leadership is building in those consistent monitoring points that could easily be on a committee agenda, could easily be an Invest Atlanta board agenda, and I've only been on there for 3 months. Right? Could easily be on the agenda to have consistent monitoring. You're not making these decisions when you're at a critical point, and that's what's happening. So for me, I think it could easily be part of the game, right? Like let's move as much as we can. And when we get to this point, let's push decision makers to the wall where you have to make a choice. But if we as decision makers are truly doing accountability and enforcement like it should be, you should along the way. You should be monitoring that along the way, so when you get to this point, we've already ironed out all of those pieces. The community benefits agreement, it has to be a mandate. Not every, no, I'm telling
But
you.
how do you do it?
You have to lead in that way. You have to be courageous that if it's a document, and I'm a trained lawyer, if it is a document that you agreed to, we will have to hold you responsible for it.
You know this as a trained attorney. CBAs and MOUs are handshake deals at the end of the day.
MOUs can be, but CBAs, if you actually force the drafting of those agreements, they actually be construed and
So
implemented
what
as
needs to
contracts.
change to make them enforceable? Because they're not enforceable.
Well, I think it has to come from us, we need it from a legislative policy piece, I
So
truly
you
do.
believe that there's policy that needs to create enforcement mechanisms?
Absolutely, because
Why do you
that's,
think they haven't done that yet? Because you're not the first person, I've been doing this for 10 years, right? So I have council members always tell me this. We have to make sure that we are enforcing what it is that we say. We've got to have our Atlanta people. And then what happens is that they get on council and then we don't see any enforceability. What would you do differently than current council members?
what I'm telling you I would do differently, and ensuring that I'm making sure those, and it's work, that's the thing, like, it's work. So I don't know if people are not willing to do the work, not willing to build the systems, not willing to build the mechanisms to do that work, to build those pieces to monitor, but I'm telling you what my template would be. And the reason why I'm telling you, because I've done it before, I've seen it happen. I've done it when I was leading the school board, I do it in my everyday job.
You say it, what do you mean?
Like the enforceability piece, yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Create a monitoring schedule where you're consistently monitoring, you're tracking it as part of your formal agenda, making sure that your agreements are tight, you're working collectively with your general counsel and your law department to ensure that it's forcible, and having those tough, ugly conversations at the beginning.
Could you give me an example when you were in your leadership on the school board, where you created a enforceable CBA? What is it that made it enforceable? Was it just that you chose to enforce it as opposed to not enforce it? You had a choice, but you did the right thing? Or was there some particular mechanism that was in place that created enforceability with a very specific project? And then were the goals actually achieved? And if at any point the goals were not achieved, what'd you do about it?
Yeah, so on the school system side with our community benefits, with our community benefits agreements, a lot of those are tied to development. So the one I can think of is the Dominion, the most recent one is Dominion Development that was built in Greenbrier. And one of those big pieces, at first it started with this very general conversation of the community benefits agreement was going to be, the developer had to every year donate books or something to the schools. We've seen that a million times, like to your point, it is very small, we're like, no, we're gonna take it a step, we wanna take it a step further, because a federal cluster of schools need a deeper investment from a development that large. So I work closely with Councilwoman Overstreet, with the NPU leadership, so that was NPUR leadership, with the developers, the neighborhood associations, the cluster principals was at the table in terms of how can this developer really support what their needs. And so we create a foundation where the developer will give a X amount of dollars each year, $25,000 each year, to fund the Thera Cluster Foundation. And so what we've done, we've taken the power of how to distribute those dollars at the school level, because what the school leaders stated is that they were tired of the developers just giving them stuff. And if I need the book bags, I may need more technology for my students, or we may need parent university. I may want you to fund the 3 parent liaison positions.
Dollars go. So
yes, but we had to create the entity to be able to do that. So we as a community came together, created the 501c3, the Cluster Foundation. In the community benefits agreement, it states annually that the developer will give X amount of dollars to the Cluster Foundation. In exchange, we'll, tell you, send a report, show you what we've done with those things, and we have enforced that across the board. Now, in terms of if there's any language or clause of enforceability, not on our
Because tomorrow, if they decide not to give the $25,000 or to go in a different direction than what the original proposed agreement
was, what happens? What's the
Yeah,
accountability?
Yeah, I think you could, in fact, and I would even argue, I think I would move to a legal parameter on that and have that agreement construed as a potential contract because of the benefits that came out of it, the work that had been performed, the services that have been provided, some of the basic things that, some of the basic things that you can interpret that to be. That's a level of work that the level of work and investment that I don't think is happening. And I do feel as a city council leader, having that experience and having that knowledge base benefits in that space because you're able to look at problems and look at it in multiple different ways.
Yeah. So, when you were on school board, you went in 2013, you won in 2013, you've been on school board since then. One thing that people often talk about, we're not gonna talk too much about school board because this isn't a school board election, right?
Thank
So,
you.
and there will be one next year.
Yes.
When you were on school board, people want to talk about charter schools. So,
Yeah.
and I'm less interested in having a debate here, right, about charter school, but one of the things you said was that you are charter neutral. And you're like, look, if that's what families want, if that is what people want, then I'm a representative of the people. I'm going to listen to what it is that people want to say. How much do you factor in when the public tells you, I want this? How do you know whether that voice is representative of the larger collective and is not just a more powerful group of people who are in your ear and able to get access to your attention?
Because I'm on the ground. I make sure that I'm present. I make sure I'm on the ground. I make sure that I am connected with as many communities as I am, as many groups of parents as I talk to our students. I'm in the community to get a full understanding and well-roundedness of understanding issues and understanding impact and truly understanding if this is what people wants to be. And I've been very, very adamant about being very vocal about my position on being charter neutral. I tell everybody, my job as your board member, as a school board member, is not to decide where to send your child to school. My ultimate goal is to make sure that all of our schools are of great high quality, so you as a parent can choose to decide, so you have that choice to decide where to send your children, where to educate. I just want all of our schools to be great, period. And so, we had situations where it was that loud, that loud influential group that wanted something, and I heard different things from the community. I took that and I said, well, this is what these communities are saying that was promised to them, that it is not here. Help answer this for me so I can take that back to the communities that you've made a commitment to. And when that wasn't happening, that gives me the knowledge base to step in and say, this is why I can't support this.
Yeah. So perfect transition to 16 hours of public comment inside of City Hall. There are 116,000 people plus have signed a petition that they disagreed with the decision that the city council made. Our city charter offers a right, to the public to be able to say, if you disagree with a elected official or a decision that is made by a governing body, that you have the right to petition for that decision to be put to a public vote. The situation around Cop City has been one where there's a large group of people who felt like, I went out there, I was told this is the democratic process. I'm supposed to show up to city council, I'm supposed to talk to my council member, and it wasn't just one or two people, it wasn't 5 or 6 people. This is hundreds of people who took off of work, got childcare, did what they needed to do to be there at City Hall, expressed their views on the fact that they believed a lease agreement should not happen between the city and the Atlanta Police Foundation. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions on this. Number one, the city of Atlanta making a decision to lease land to the Atlanta Police Foundation, would you have voted yes or no on their decision to do that if you were on council?
If there was a lease to lease,
There is a actual piece of legislation that was introduced in 2021 where the city council had to make a decision to lease publicly owned land in DeKalb County, to lease that to the Atlanta Police Foundation in order to construct a training facility. That training facility would be used by a number of different entities, but the lease agreement is between the city of Atlanta and the Atlanta Police Foundation. There was 16 hours of public comment, vast majority of which said that they disagreed with the idea to do that lease transfer. What would you have, the vote happened, we all know it passed. Where would you have stood on that? Would you have voted yes or voted no?
I would have asked for us to, based on with all the factors and the lack of engagement and the feedback that was shared, I would have asked for us to hold that agreement until we really truly engaged with the community and firmly understood what were the aches and what were the main issues. Now, I wasn't on city council at this time, so there's a lot of conversations about what was done, before, with previous administrations, what that dialogue was, but from the factors that I would have asked for the possibility of holding it until we firmly understood the community engagement effort, what that looks like, those key pieces, because I want to start with saying it's very clear, and we have the polls to show that the community at large know there's a need for, train our officers differently, the need for new facilities. What that is an example of how we have truly eroded the community's trust and truly eroded how we engage community in a process which we as elected leaders and city leaders should have done differently.
So Councilmember Archibald at the time did actually call for a delay of that decision. Called for a delay for that decision to be made. That delay lasted all of a few weeks, and it was reintroduced, and it was voted on by the majority and voted in favor. What would you have done differently in the community engagement process? And was it just you believe that there needed to be more time, and ultimately we should lease land to the Atlanta Police Foundation to build this? Because ultimately that's the question. I actually reject the premise that this question is about whether police should be trained or not. That's actually not what this legislation says. It doesn't say, if you don't do this, police will not be trained. Police will be trained. There's training in the budget. There are facilities that exist right now. The question is should the city of Atlanta lease land to the Atlanta Police Foundation, a third-party entity, in order to build a new training facility? That was the question at hand. Initially, the vote was, let's delay. After a few weeks, then the vote was yes, we should lease land to the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is at the core of the question and the conversation that's been happening over the past 2 years. So I have every other person on record on where they would have voted on that. And so I want to get a sense of if that vote was in front of you, where would you vote?
Yeah, if the question is to whether to lease land to build a new facility, absolutely, just as it is, yes. But with all of the factors in play, with all of the conversations in terms of locale, community engagement, I would still maintain my position in terms of holding it until we really truly iron out, because you gotta have community buy-in in major decisions this way.
Do you believe that there was community buy-in in
No,
this
I
process?
don't.
So if there wasn't
To a degree, yeah.
So the challenge is
Because we're still dealing with it, and I think it definitely is
they're
going to be.
constructing it. It'll be done by October.
But that doesn't, in community engagement, I think we're just on the precipice of it. It's going to continue.
What could community engagement do now to actually change any outcome related to this particular project?
So the thing is that the community engagement will have to continue, because even if the project is halted or not, there still has to be, you still have to communicate with.
We've lost the trust in the
You
community. It's not that I feel.
Yeah, you do. You do, because.
Me and 116,000 other people feel that, and which include Dr. Bernice King, which include members of elected office that are serving us nationally, that are serving us locally. There are a number of people who not only believed that the community engagement process was bad, but that the actual decision in the way that it was made is a wrong decision. We are leasing land to a third-party foundation, which is run mostly by corporate leaders that are not, this is not a group of public officials that are running this thing. We agreed to lease land to them, and then we agreed to transfer $60 million to that. This is and the reason, and when I interviewed the mayor when he was running for office, when he was a council member, he said the reason why we chose to move forward is a benevolent donor came to us and said, we want to build this now, and so we had to act. So everything we just talked about, which was the challenges in development that happens in Atlanta, which is corporate entity or individual or wealthy donor X comes to the city and says, we want to do this. And you have an outcry from communities saying, we don't like that, that should not happen. City council decides to move forward anyway. The challenge right now, and we'll get into the referendum part of it, but what I first want to get on record is whether you are okay with this. So yes, so your answer is yes, you would have voted yes.
I said I would have voted, you said to enter into a lease agreement with a third party entity. My answer was yes, because we do that. You have 501c3, you have other charitable organizations that are leasing land from public entities throughout the city. No, that's not hypothetical either. So we think about Junior Achievement, we think about some of our other nonprofits, you have this. So I answered your question. Now, I'm gonna take a step further for you. Layering it with everything that we know in terms of the community engagement pieces, benevolent donor, all of those things that I was not at the table for 3 years ago, and still not at the table for, then yes, my decision would change and I still would ask for it to be held until we iron out all of these details so we can fully communicate to the public on that. So that would be my decision at that end. Let me take another level for you. So what you're saying is, what I got from you is, once this facility is done, and it's going to be completed in December, is it your understanding, because I don't take it that way, that community engagement stops?
Of course it doesn't
So
stop.
that's what I'm telling you.
Of course it doesn't stop,
This
but
is
the
still
problem,
it's going to continue.
the issue we have is that the community has engaged time and time and time again, and there is a lack of trust. There is a broken trust that has come out of this particular situation.
That is not my fault, but if I'm elected, I'm going to do whatever I can do. No, but what I'm telling you is, what I'm saying is, once I'm elected, my goal would be investing into that to figure out what we need to do to rebuild the community's trust. And that's all that I will be able to do. And anyone, even if it's not me elected, any of my other opponents, they will be faced with that same situation.
So the next set of thing that happened here is that the public did decide that they wanted to pursue a referendum. 100,000 plus petitions were submitted to City Council. City Council today has not taken any action on actually validating and verifying those 100,000 plus petitions. There are people who are waiting for what City Council will actually do. Now, City Council has two options. City Council can either A, continue to wait, and continue to wait it out. Now, as we said, this was a year ago, so almost to the day. A year ago is when that referendum happened. So of course, now that it's built, it's easy to be like, yeah, we've got to keep engaging the community, we want to hear what you have to say. It's like, yeah, but a year ago, we asked you to hear us, right?
Yeah.
So now, what has happened is, we have a petition that is sitting with council that either they can say, we're gonna continue to wait and continue to battle it out in the courts, or we could put it on the ballot ourselves, because there's clearly outcry. What you said, and I agree with, is that community engagement was insufficient,
It was not where it should have been. Even today, it's not where it should be. It is odd that the facility continues to be constructed while people were like, hey, can we talk about this? Like, wait, a person was killed in the process of this, right? So now we're at a point where council, the option B is put it directly on the ballot, which council does all the time. They put a referendum on the ballot all the time. Would you support or author legislation to put this on the ballot?
If elected?
If elected.
Okay, so that'd be December, and the facility will be complete by December?
Yep.
So then what would that look like if the facility is completed, the referendum is to put it on?
The referendum is on the piece of legislation to actually lease the land to the Atlanta Police Foundation. So arguably, and there's a lot of legal minds that have put their brains on this, so I'm not claiming to have a full synopsis, right? But arguably, if the referendum is asking to overturn the decision on the lease, what it would do is it would cut the lease, right? It would say there is no longer a lease agreement between the city of Atlanta and the Atlanta Police Foundation. That's what the referendum would have the power to do. It doesn't have the power to stop construction. You could argue maybe it should or it shouldn't, but at the end of the day, the referendum is to break the lease agreement with the Atlanta Police Foundation.
Okay, so then you'll build, so then they'll be building a facility.
The facility would then be owned by, I mean, it's city-owned land. The facility is owned by the city of Atlanta.
And so then the city still could enter in a lease agreement even after that referendum,
But this is the problem.
No, that's what I'm asking, because I'm asking you because.
Oh, they absolutely
because
could.
for me, solutions are, when I work through solutions, I'm working through solutions for a finite outcome.
Of
And so
course.
I'm asking these questions
Totally.
based
That's why
on
the
being
first-
a part of the process to understand.
My issue throughout this whole thing was that, number one, there has never been a process for how this is supposed to work. City council never codified the process.
Yeah.
That's problem number one.
Yeah,
Problem number two for me is that the city charter does allow for referenda.
yeah,
A referendum process should have
Mhm.
actually been built out.
yeah.
Number three, construction should not have persisted when you have this much public outcry. There should have been a stall and a push to say, wait, let's actually get this community engagement process.
I agree with you.
You agree with
Check, check, yeah.
Okay, so then now the problem is that community has been saying, do you hear us? Do you hear us? Do you hear us? A year has passed by. So arguably, now there would be this facility. You could repurpose the facility, that is an option, right? It doesn't have to be a police training facility. You could say the city of Atlanta will run this police training facility. We're not gonna outsource it to a third party, but the city of Atlanta is going to run this facility. You could say, we're gonna tear it down, right? You could say, we're gonna tear it down and give that park that we promised the community in the first place. They were supposed to get a full green space in the park, and you talked about this. People promise communities things, and then they go back on it. This is one of those scenarios where the community was promised a green space in the park. You could say, we're gonna give you back the green space in the park. The city would have a whole multitude of options on this. So I'm just curious where you stand on that, because I think this is a big issue for a lot of voters.
Absolutely, and I think it's a complex one.
Of
based
course,
on-
yeah.
No, seriously, I think it's a complex one based on what we are, like time and what we are.
Sure.
So knowing that this election is on, it's 4 or 5 people in the race, more than likely, hopefully, I don't know if a runoff, but a runoff is December 3rd. This facility is to be completed in December. You're asking for the referendum to still be on the ballot for this November or next November, because based on the election calendar, it has to be on, there needs to be, this
Right,
matters
yes,
though.
I'm
So
saying
that's the
yes.
thing.
I'm
Like,
saying
we
yes,
can't discount this. It
I'm
matters, Rohit, because.
You should, I'm not discounting it.
No.
I'm just answering, you asked a question,
Yeah.
which was, would it be for this November? The call was for it to be last November, then it was March, then it was this November, right? So now, if we pass this November, then the next election would be, if there is a primary period or a special election called, or it would be next November.
Right, and so thinking through that, and I hate to have like this two-way dialogue, because I think that all of that matters, because now what is the end game, right? So this facility is going to be finished in December. You're asking for the referendum to be on here. If it's November, the election calendar states that this referendum needs to be approved and locked loaded
So what do
within
we
the
do
next.
with people who are saying, I mean, you know what people are saying when they want the referendum. They're saying that they believe that this facility itself should not be built, right? That there is a push. Now, there are some people who are like, I just believe people should have the right to decide whether it should be built or not. But if people are asking, tens of thousands of people are asking you to allow this to go to public vote, and it still doesn't go to public vote, and it still gets built, do you see how building trust after that would be really difficult? And maybe you have ideas on how we would do that?
Not really. So again, I'm gonna go back to the fact that I firmly think we have to think about where we are currently in this process. So if we build this facility if it's completed in December, if it's scheduled to be completed in December, you want the referendum on the ballot. We missed the deadline to have it on November ballot.
We haven't missed that deadline.
Well, I'm saying if it is,
So
right?
let's say that deadline is missed, correct?
So say the deadline is missed. The next time will be a whole year out in next November. And let's say there's movement on it to get it on the ballot. That referendum is passed, the voters decide to end the lease. Then we have to determine whether this full-blown facility that's probably already been in operation, what to do with that investment. And so that's for me, that's what I'm like, what is the end outcome?
Yeah, it's a fair
What is
question.
it? No, it is a very, very, very fair, valid question, because in that scenario, no one wins.
Yeah.
No one wins.
So I think that's where we're headed toward. So what do we do?
So exactly,
Yeah.
so that's where I am maintaining that community engagement is so key in this space, because we have a finite timeline and we can't dismiss this. We have a finite timeline that we have to strategically think about this. Any of us that's elected, that's in December, I'm thinking about the end game.
It feels intentional though, right? The delay.
Absolutely.
It feels intentional. It's kind of like, oh, play democracy for us, please, right? Like, come out, check out city council. Absolutely, come fill out a referendum. Go fill out some stuff. Actually, wait. We're gonna come up with a process. And then we're 1 year later. I am just thinking, look, where I think me, you, plus everyone else who is running for this position, where we have agreement, is that building back the public's trust is going to be core to the success of any role that is here. And I can tell you, as someone who is also on the ground, you said you're on the ground as well, like, people do not trust the word of their elected officials. And this, to me, is one of the biggest moment. I mean, this is national, if not global news. I mean, when I am talking to my national colleagues and others, they're asking me, what is happening in Atlanta? So if you are on council, and you are there, what could be done to appease at least the folks who are saying we've been calling on this for 2 years? What would you do to build trust with them? Would you say, sorry guys, it's built? Or what would you say?
No, it would have to be, this is a Herculean effort where you have to get engaged with the community to understand all sides. And I'm gonna have the conversation of pulling everyone to the table to let me know what the end game is. Because from what I just laid out, what you and I just kind of went through strategic wise, I'm still left with all of this plays itself out. Where are we still? And that's a space we don't need to continue to go down as a city, go down the path as a city.
If tens of thousands of your constituents came to you and you were elected, and they said, Eshé, the thing has been built, a referendum is not on the ballot right now, but tens of thousands of us do not agree with this decision that council made. We believe that it should cease to be a training facility until we can have a full visioning workshop of what should happen, like the community should have full buy-in and something should be on the ballot. Because council doesn't have to put the referendum language on the ballot, they can put any referendum language on the ballot, which is part of the dangerous thing, because council members have tried to skirt that by saying, well, we're just gonna ask people, do you support the police or not? That's a purely political move to do that. Because this isn't about whether you support the police or not. This is about whether you believe land should be transferred to a third-party entity and whether the city of Atlanta should spend tens of millions of dollars on a facility that you may or may not agree with. And it is also being built in a black neighborhood, in a black community that was promised that was gonna be a public park. That's weird. This whole thing is very strange.
So then how would you say that for the agreements that we have when we are entering into a third-party agreement with the organization that's providing transitional housing for our unhoused, and the city is putting
I think
millions
we
of
should
dollars to
have-
help that?
yeah,
So
so-
you're saying that we should invalidate that?
That would be a false binary, a false equivalency. What I'm saying, because what I'm saying is, when we contract people to, like, if you contract a third party that is doing literacy or housing, I'm on the housing side, right? If you look at the housing side, the actual mandates that you have to follow, you will have council members who are on the boards and the commissions of these things.
Gotcha.
The level of
Okay.
oversight that is there. I'll tell you this,
I
the
gotcha.
Atlanta Police Foundation today, according to the Office of the Inspector General, is not subject to open records requests. So if the Atlanta Police Foundation is building something, it is absolutely the case. If you file an open records request, because they will say, we are not a city entity, we are just a vendor, right? We do not fall under the Office of the Inspector General's request around having transparency of information.
Through the city or the state?
The city. If I want to get information on, for example, whether let's just say you fully agree with the training facility being built. If I want to get information on whether they follow.
That's it, I don't give up.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
No, I'm just saying, it's a hard conversation, and I appreciate you going through it, right? Like, I think it's an important thing for us to go through, because usually it's a binary thing, it is complicated, right? But let's just say, I want to find out whether the Atlanta Police Foundation is following the minority contractor requirements that exist. There is no way for me to get an answer to that question, because that data is not available.
Okay.
Additionally, council members are supposed to sit on the board of the Atlanta Police Foundation per this agreement. They have not, there's not a single meeting minutes that have been received by the general public. So this thing has continued to get constructed without transparency and oversight.
Yes.
So maybe let me transition us to the next thing. So we talk about this all night, right? And I only have a little bit more time with you, and I know you got I know. But the Office of the Inspector General is an office that was actually created after a number of corruption scandals inside of City Hall, many of which kind of looked like this, frankly. And the Office of the Inspector General, the Inspector General herself, she went to City Hall and she said that her office is in an emergency, that she is not able to conduct investigations because there's obstruction from high-level city officials. If you are elected as a city council member, what would you do to protect the integrity and the investigations of the office?
Absolutely, yeah. I thought about this a lot because we did the same thing, not so much this magnitude on the school system side, but when I was vice chair of the board, making sure that our Office of Internal, OIC, our Office of Internal Compliance was an independent reporting arm to the board, hire that individual and those key pieces. So I definitely think having that structure in place, but also ensuring that the Office of Inspector General is embedded. I think that's where I do definitely think that's where your committees and the council agenda matters, making sure that those spaces are codified for the Office of Inspector General to be able to report out on those pieces. If we don't have the policy and legislation to define the roles and responsibility of the Office of Inspector General and provide that cover, we do need to create it. And it can be happen, it can actually happen. And so I thought about that a lot because I think also, again, this is the engagement piece. What also needs to change is the mindset and the tone for what the Office of Inspector General or even, Office of Internal Compliance, whatever those auditory functions are supposed to be. You need that, like you want that kind of examination, that kind of evaluation of your systems and processes, because that only helps you become more efficient, more transparent, and more responsive to who you're serving.
So the Inspector General actually sat here just a few weeks ago, and she said, she believes that her identity has played a huge role in how she's been treated by this particular city council, that she's not Atlanta enough, right? That there was that she has been not only critiqued, she has been threatened, she has been a whole sort of slate of things. And then even during city council's actual meeting, the city council rejected the idea that she might be in an emergency and refused to go into an executive session to talk to her. One of the biggest things she said was, I don't have access to outside legal counsel. This is related to the Cop City situation as well. Even if there were council members who believe that we should put it on the ballot, even if the Inspector General believes there's an investigation that should happen, the city of Atlanta has one legal department. That law department actually reports to the mayor. The mayor is their client, and the city council is their client. And in this case, so is the office of the Inspector General. You're a lawyer, right? This setup can't be what it should be, right? Or do you believe that that's okay? And if you do believe it's okay, then how do we ensure that when there's conflict between one of those entities, that can be resolved? And if you don't believe it's okay, then what should the structure of our law department be?
That's a complex one as well, because generally that is a structure. Generally the thing is that generally that is an acceptable structure to have when you have your general counsel, that the services, we have it in the school system side, our general counsel services the superintendent, also services the board, our ORC department. But if there are those issues that are conflict, there is a parameter provision where general counsel advised to seek outside counsel where it could be, muddy or murky or whatnot, or it's just best practice, period.
But superintendent ultimately is hired by the board, so that makes sense that the board ultimately, this is their attorney, then that is your employee.
There's been situations where we had to get outside, you can imagine where, there's been conflict between entities where outside counsel was definitely needed. It was actually the best practice to have, because what you haven't done is continue to fester and create the conflict in its space. So I don't know the details in terms of what the Office of the Inspector General is, but what I will say, you have my commitment in terms of being able to look deeper into this, and also the city council member thinking about those policies and pieces that we can put in place to allow that. But I also think it has to start, because I had to lead this space, started with a mindset shift of you want your Office of Inspector General, you want your internal office, your internal affairs, you want them to do this work because it helps you be a more efficient system, it helps you be more responsive, it is the transparency community piece that they are expecting for us as the city leaders to actually do. And so, I hate that it is going in this space, but there is opportunity to truly improve, and I've seen it done. I'm ready to get in and do that work. But I think it is necessary.
So a lot of this comes also from a place of fear of retaliation that happens from folks. People behave and act a certain way sometimes because they're afraid of what someone may do to them, right? And what they may happen. I mean, we were in a situation with the Atlanta School Board where I interviewed every superintendent over the course of the past few years, and when I interviewed Maria Karstarfin, when she left, she was very clear that there was a lot of retaliation for what she believed and now whether we agree or disagree with that, we're not going to get into the pieces of that. People can go back and watch that where I had a lot less gray hair, but at the end of the day, retaliation is a part of the Atlanta way in some cases. We've experienced it as an organization that is doing this. People are like, oh, you really want to ask tough questions? Then we'll see what happens with your permit and what happens here and there. I've experienced that time and time again. I think that what that usually leads to then is either a coercion or like kind of a assimilation into this Atlanta way or this Atlanta system, right? You endorsed Mayor Dickens when he was running. I don't know what your relationship is with him now, and there is a lot of disagreement with kind of the quote-unquote establishment of the Atlanta politics. That there are a lot of people who hold power who, if they wave their finger and they say, you better not do this, everybody falls in line. Now, you've already talked about your upbringing. I'm not going to suggest in any way that you would simply just fall in line, but what are you actively able to do to differentiate kind of the disappointment that a lot of progressives have had, I would say, of putting people on council to say, you say you're going to do all this, you say you're going to be methodical, you say you're going to engage the community, and then I just watch you do the same nonsense that everybody else is doing. Why should we trust you that that's going to be any different with you?
Absolutely, absolutely, I appreciate that. And first off, I'm gonna say I reacted because I'm from Zone 6. No, just kidding, but.
I've done this long enough that I know exactly what that means.
You know what?
Yeah.
I appreciate this because I know that feeling. I know that feeling pushing, so even when you were talking about, like, even the times with Dr. C that, in support of her still is in terms of the retaliation and if you go.
She's not here, right?
You're going too hard. And I mean, and I've been in spaces where I've advocated, where I represented the complete south side of the city, where our schools were the hardest hit from the cheating scandal, where we've had, we have the lowest number of schools. We're constantly fighting to not have our schools closed, all of those key pieces. And I know there are people that will say some things about me out here in retaliation to firm stance that I have, and just in terms of ensuring that I'm fighting for our families and our children every single day. What I will tell you the difference is, and I'm very vocal about this, you will not catch me running in front of a mic, in front of a podium. I'm not the rah-rah girl. I'm not. What I am the very strategic, thoughtful, look at the problem, think about the solution. What is the end game and the outcome? How can we address this? And with the understanding, you're not going to be able to make everyone happy, but how can we truly make a decision, make an outcome that benefits all of us? And what is the next steps in that space? And that's my values, and that's what I'm committed to. Being elected on city is very tough, and you're going to have to take some hits. You're going to have to be vocal. For me, and I don't know if this the Atlanta way either, is the fact that there's a level of fearlessness that I move in that space. Also, I think for me is, at the end of the day, I just want to do the work. I don't have ambitions of being a higher office or anything, and never has. I just want to do the work.
I'll tell you the thing that, like, I just put the elephant right in the room, right? I think because of the 5 people who are running for office, right? You are the only one who's currently holding office.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there's this feeling, right? I'm just saying. There's a feeling of like, all right.
Yeah.
Everybody is about to just make sure that they co-opt Eshé. She's gonna become part of the machine. She's gonna get the endorsements of all those folks who continue to play games in Atlanta's face, right? And I'll tell you, there are folks who I think who come out and know that their endorsements mean that what they are saying, whether you believe it or not, what they're saying is like, now we are going to bring this person into this machine, right? And I think for a lot of people that's scary, right? And I think when people look at that, there's like, are you the establishment candidate? Are you the mayor's pick? Are you the people on council who you were on school board with, right? Are you going to just be a part of this same, I'll say it, disappointing entity that has played in people's faces? And I think people are like, well, why have someone who's a part of that machine right now inside of an elected office?
Why have someone?
Why should I not be afraid that? And I think that's because it has happened so often to folks where they say one thing and they do another. Yeah. And it happens usually with people who have held office before.
I appreciate you with that question, because I think it happens on both sides. What I would say for you on my end in that question, in terms of being afraid that I'm the establishment, I've been elected for 10 years, and I've been in the school system and have really done on-the-ground grunt work to move this district forward, and no one has ever put me in establishment on the machine. Yes, I have friends on city council because I serve on the school board. I call them out: Matt Westmoreland, Byron Amos, Courtney English, who's the chief policy officer. We all serve on the school system side together. I am my own person. I will start with that. I am Eshé Collins, and I gave you my story, and this is who I am. I've been in this elected space, and the fear of an establishment. Guess what? You all elected people that was a part of that, and you're disappointed with them because guess what? They showed you another side. I have a proven track record. You can look at the work that I've done. You can look at what I fought for, what I've advocated for. You can even ask my adversaries and those that may dislike me, ask them why don't you favor Eshé? It's not going to be, oh, she's part of the establishment, she's part of the machine. What they will tell you is, because I pushed on what they may have wanted me to do that didn't align with what my community wanted. So if any people, and so any organization that endorsed me, whether if it's a labor union, it's because I fought for labor. We've given our teachers the highest raises that we can. It took 6 years. I've been in board leadership for 6 years. So my entire time as board leadership, it took me 6 years. It took us 6 years to get our teachers to the highest salary that we have now. I fought for labor, but we have 300 plus employees that were contract employees with SCFE that are now full-time employees with APS that can earn a livable wage in this city, take advantage of our pension, get good health benefits, be able to take maternity and parental leave. That's my track record. My track record in terms of pushing more dollars, changing our funding when the state wouldn't do it, changing our student funding where we're no longer funding schools based on student numbers, we're based on student needs. So yes, that does look like more dollars is being invested on the south and the west side of this city because we are educating more children in high poverty, more children with special needs, more children that need wraparound services. So the investment dollars are going to mean that. So I would tell anyone, if you have any fear of who Eshé is, look at my track record, look at my proven record. And that's what sets me apart from the other candidates. I can walk through with you solutions where we currently, one of the last things I did before I rolled off as chair of the board was ensure that we codified our vacant properties and created a land trust that we now as a school system can now take part of affordable housing for land where it's too small for us to build as a school, but we know it's an ecosystem for communities throughout the city. So that's what I would say. Look at my track record, and that's the thing, you can hold against me, right? You can hold against me the good, the bad, and the ugly of the work I've done, being part of the school board, one of our largest ecosystems, our largest tax base in the city. Hold me accountable for that. But what I will tell you in terms of there's any fear of being an established candidate or being the machine, I have a track record where you can actually hold me against it. My other opponents, not so much so I would be even more fearful to say one of them get elected, you may run into the same thing that you already have in supporting those that were.
I think the challenge is also like, we've seen the school board become kind of this incubator for city council.
Oh yeah, I love this question.
Right,
Yeah.
so folks will be like, yeah, I mean, and you consciously chose not to resign from your position, right?
Yes.
And there's, according to Byron Amos, when he was exiting his position to run for council, he claims that there was legal guidance and advice that he was supposed to. You've asked him for that paper and not received it.
Exactly, you would, because there wasn't a guidance that was given.
I got you.
Yeah.
So, just saying what was said.
Yeah.
So then, and then when Jason Estevez left his position, he chose to stay he chose to stay on school board while he was running for other office. But I think there's this feeling of like, because there's so much mistrust, because there's so many things that's there, it's like, all right, so one, is Eshé just like, okay, she doesn't run, so now she's just she gets to keep her position on school board and then you'll run again, right? Like, or what is your political pathway here? And then in terms of these staggered terms, isn't there a precedent that's being set, which is like, if you're on school board and you want to potentially pursue office, you could say, while I'm on school board, I'm going to pursue another office. And if I don't get it, it's all good. I'm still secure on my school board. Isn't there a precedent of people having to do this dual role of campaigning and also serve on their school board? Is that not something that we should be concerned about as residents or citizens?
So let me take a couple of things with that. Your first comment in terms of being an incubator for city council, I appreciate that question because I look at my experience differently.
Yeah.
I've been on the board for the last 11 years. This wasn't an incubator for city council for me at all. This for me was a true generational commitment of seeing a full educational pathway through for my children in the city. When in 2020, when we were in the middle of COVID. I can give you a list of every single year, whether it was fighting Opportunity School District, whether it was fighting, building our literacy plans, superintendent transition. I can give you something, a major event every year that we've experienced in education. So I would push back in terms of me using this as a launch pad for city council. A decade commitment is not, that's not a launch pad measurement. What for me running for city council has nothing to do with any political aspirations for me. I have not, and I can say people have tapped me for a lot of things. I firmly believe, and I share this with you, local impact matters the most. I love being able to connect with my communities, see our impact, touch our impact, listen, let me know how you can hold me accountable. The close proximity of relationship I love to have with my constituents and my community is why I will always run for a local office, whether I'm elected for this or not. Me choosing not to resign for me, resigning would be a selfish act of me. Because my community and my students and our schools still need representation. And I have served the community, they know me, they know how to get me, I know what my schools need. We have a great relationship in terms of that. So I'm not gonna leave my community with no representation because I personally.
They would appoint someone, correct?
No.
You would need to be open.
So.
An election would need to be.
So if.
Because you're on the other side.
Yes, so if I had stepped down, if I resigned with less than, if there's more than a year left on my term, there would have had to be a special election. That's what happened with Byron.
Yep.
Now with this seat, if I'm, this seat, when I'm elected, then because it's less than a year, my seat will be appointed and then that person will run. So that is my personal piece for not resigning. For resigning will be a selfish act on my end. My community, my children and my family still deserve representation. And is it a lot? Is a lot of work managing both? Absolutely. But that's what a public servant do, and that's the commitment that I've made. I have a good relationship and ebb and flow with all the leaders in the district. I just rolled off this board leadership. So I feel extremely confident of being able to do both. I announced to my community last summer that I wasn't seeking re-election in 2025. So that has already been out there before this opportunity even came. And when this opportunity came for community was saying, well, who is a good, I started getting the calls just as much as I got the calls when the community tapped me for me to run in 2013. So for me, it's very clear. Running for this position is continuing to fight for a city that thrives for all of us, like I've always. No matter what side of town, no matter our income, no matter what our zip code is, we should all be able to thrive in this city, to live affordably, have access to what makes our city great. Your city leadership should be responsive to that in every form and fashion possible through the good, bad, and the ugly, so.
I have two other questions, but I'm gonna open it up.
Yes.
So that I can make sure that we get audience questions, and then I'll ask you two other questions that we asked every other candidate, so I just wanna make sure we're consistent.
Okay.
All right, let's open it up. Any questions from this side here? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, yes, so I really appreciate you coming out and whatnot. But Eshé, could you talk about the connection between affordable housing and high quality, frequent mass transit, and what would your priorities be in that area?
Yep, so definitely affordable housing and high quality mass transit is just that. I mean, it allows people to move easily throughout this city and also have access to all of the great things that, again, like I said, that make this city great. So there's a deep connection to high quality mass transit and affordable housing. And we're seeing how that plays out. If you look at the heat map where most of the jobs that you can earn a great wage is in the midtown and northern part of the city. The largest population of those that use mass transit is on the south and the west side corridor of this city. So there we see the inequities there, and the need for affordable housing they're married in that regards. My priority in terms, your second question was in terms, my priorities with the mass transit piece.
I mean, both the connection of that, but yes, and the.
I would start with saying my priority is the access to it all. We still have communities in this city where and these projects are on the list and they have been approved for years that still have inconsistent bus and transit scheduling. still don't have access to it, unsafe bus stops to get there. So for me, the priority is how can we, what needs to happen, because the plans are there. So let me stop there. The plans are there, things are written, we have a commitment. It's time to move towards really solid, a sense of urgency and action. What needs to happen to expand our mass transit options in those areas and in those cities where they are needed the most, and we're seeing it with the Campbellton Road corridor, you're seeing it in the Summer Hill, but truly addressing the equitable access issue of transit in this city. And we know that there are pockets where it's not. And so for me, that is a top priority, because I know those communities that use it, where it will be lenient to make sure those projects are a priority in that regards, and then in terms of ensuring that we are addressing that throughout the city.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're speaking about following through on the plans that we have for transit that's out there. Do you support building the light rail on the Beltline that we have currently planned that connects all the different quadrants of Atlanta?
Yeah, I support Beltline Rail in terms of how it fits into the priority of our other projects, and I'll be very honest with that, because we still have communities that can't even access the Beltline as it is. And that's where I share with you in terms of equitable access to mass transit, so we can communities on the west side and south side, and still parts of southeast Atlanta, where we have students that still cannot even access the Beltline. And so my priority would be making sure that we provide that access and those tentacles, the whole design, the tentacles of the Beltline that was supposed to go out to certain communities, making sure we fulfill that promise, and then prioritize what that larger conversation is in terms of Beltline Rail. I know there's a lot of dialogue right now that is happening, and I'm following it closely in terms of the analysis, the funding, because we don't get any funding from the state. Then there's a conversation in terms of city funding and some of the other funding sources of that. So I'm following that conversation and dialogue very closely. But I do think it's important for us to address the issue of access, period, so that all the communities in the city can be able to access the Beltline that's just not apparent right now.
So on that, do you believe that we can afford to delay, or do you believe that we should continue building
Continue building.
Or I guess we're on schedule to start building next year. Do you believe that we should get started building next year, or do you think that we should delay or be done that?
Building what, the Beltline Rail?
The Beltline Rail, yes.
Or delay it? That's what you're asking me?
Yeah.
I do think so. I don't want to say delay, but I do think I would want to see the list of the projects that are already happening to get the access, and then how can we make those pieces happen. So I don't have a very clear answer for you, because I know there are projects that are still on the list to ensure that everyone has access to the Beltline first, and then going from there. So I don't want to say a delay, but I do think that we need to have a dialogue on how those things can actually coexist. And I don't know if I'm not a part of them, how those projects can coexist to actually meet the outcome that we want to have.
Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so, hi, I'm Heidi. Well, you already know that, but I'm Heidi, I'm Middle Major Jackson, I'm a sophomore. And you mentioned in the last question just the accessibility of the Beltline for the youth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering, because I know there might be students watching, parents watching, mothers, fathers, or just guardians in general. And so when you get elected, what are some things that you will help try to push to give more accessible programming to the youth? And then I also want to ask, just how would you support the youth in general?
Yes.
When it comes to programming? I know it's easy to say, to invest in education. I know you've heard of the school, the school board. So how do we stem away from that for the people who aren't just interested in going to college and want to go to trade school, or just want to just take that or take a different route?
Yep, great question. I appreciate that, because that is one of the pieces. in terms of, in terms of understanding that everyone is not gonna go to college. That's why we lean into developing, our, college and career academy and really lean into those pathways. And I've been a big proponent and also in leadership working with city government in terms of what are those extension opportunities that we can offer our students and our youth, our young adults, once they graduate from APS, or even our students that are still trying to find their way. How can the city really support in those opportunities? So I've been a huge proponent of increasing those workforce development opportunities and programs, of strengthening the relationship, and it has strengthened with the school system to educate, to provide those spaces to educate the community that goes beyond students that are attending. Because what we are seeing is when anyone has any questions about education, period, or a program, they're not running to the city, they're running where? To the school system, and then it's for us to, and then what we're doing, we're helping them, guide them into whether it's adult education, adult education program, workforce development, career programs, those things with the city. So if elected as city councilwoman, I'll continue to strengthen those pathways and those opportunities. And also, I think the biggest part of also is advocating for the funding of them too. Because a lot of opportunities are put out there, but one thing we often hear that there isn't any allocation of money or funding to those departments to really do the deep work, the deep communication pieces, the deep outreach pieces to make sure that we are capturing all of our students and they're being able to take advantage of those opportunities. And then the third part of that, I think, is truly about making sure it's sustainable as well. So we're not just funding it for 1 year, but then your City Council is also doing a multi-year investment in here to truly move the needle forward. So that's what you have. That's what I know I'm definitely going to be committed to as a city councilwoman, ensuring that we continue to strengthen those opportunities.
Thank you. I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. In regards to, I was talking to my friend, he's a part of Vox and one of the owners of AIE and Atlanta Influence Everything. And we were specifically talking about the future of Atlanta, specifically when it comes to events. We see the World Cup coming, we see the college football, I think, coming in January of next year. Yeah. And so we're talking a lot about what that looks like for Atlanta natives. So I don't know how I'm going to access, but I'm trying to see how will you aid in the responses to these to the future events that are going to be hosted, because we see, especially when it comes to the World Cup and especially when it comes to big events, there's a lot of displacement or there's not a lot of attention to the native people here in Atlanta. So what's your response to that, or what actions did you take in order to aid some of the fear or the concerns that we may have?
I think a great question, because I think one of the questions regarding like the World Cup and the college championship is also the economic benefit to the Atlanta community and to the Atlanta residents, and being able to take advantage of those jobs, take advantage of those employment opportunities, being able to have their small businesses highlight and be a part of that. And I think it goes to your question that we were talking about earlier in terms of community benefit agreement piece. I think that's where it's going to be extremely important for City Council to have a strong relationship with those agencies, and then that monitoring and enforcement piece is really key. And I'm not talking about just a report out at a meeting. I am truly talking about like the community, these community reporting engagement meetings. Show us the numbers. 10 shoes on, school, visit to the event to ensure that we are really ensuring that our Atlanta residents and our Atlanta citizens are able to take advantage of these opportunities, because they are actually wealth-building opportunities that we've seen from the Olympics and that we've seen from Super Bowl. And so we want to embrace that. And I think leading, legislating that, setting that mandate, being very vocal about it as a city council person, but also being on the ground to eyewitness what that work looks like, is ways that I can definitely lean in.
So last two questions.
Okay.
One is around intergovernmental agreements, right? So one of my favorite trinket games, saying that word. But the city of Atlanta created an intergovernmental agreement with Fulton County. Fulton County had a disastrous issue with it continues to have a disastrous issue with their jail. There's some overcrowding, poor conditions inside of that jail. A lot of that has repeatedly been chalked up to the fact that there has been poor leadership decisions that have been made in that jail. It's not that the jail didn't erode itself, but poor decisions over time have led to really poor conditions.
At the same time, the city of Atlanta made a commitment under Mayor Bottoms, who you referenced earlier, to get out of the jail business. That we are no longer interested in jailing people inside of a municipal jail, especially a jail that during the Olympics was used in some predatory ways to be able to, and create a lot of damage for people's lives. So the city of Atlanta gathered a bunch of community-based organizations and others to say that we're gonna shut down the jail. There was agreement on doing that and to turn it into a rehabilitative center and to make it that. But before you could even turn into that, almost immediately, the city council decided to enter the jail business again, to go into an agreement with Fulton County to lease 100 jail beds. And without actually following the coalition's recommendations on what should or shouldn't have happened. So I want to understand how you would have voted on that if you were on council. Would you have voted to lease jail beds to Fulton County? And let's start there, and then why or why not?
Yeah. So I think I don't struggle with this one, but I understand exactly what, as a former criminal defense attorney, spending many times visiting clients in Rice Street. If you have not been at Rice Street to understand the condition, to see the conditions there, is absolutely. And so the conversation in terms of the facilities and the reality is there are humans as well. They are citizens, they have rights. It is a detention center. It is not it is not a permanent prison. And so I do feel that there is a space that we do need to make investments there for our.
But the city needs to do that.
No, not necessarily. Saying we. I'm sorry. So I'm just talking about collectively. Sorry about that. In terms of the Atlanta detention facility, at that time, because we made the commitment to really do the mental health, to do the mental health service, I would have stood by that commitment. I think Mayor Bottoms at the time really had a great vision for what that is, for what that looks like.
With the community.
Collected with the community, but I also think the next step of that is what is the support and what support can we offer to to Fulton County and understanding that space, understanding that space. From my understanding, the current agreement that they have, it expires at a defined
The
time.
rate just goes up.
The rate, okay.
It doesn't,
Okay.
it's like one of those, like, if you stay in your unit.
Yeah, okay, so that's what it is, all right.
You pay a lot of rent.
Because I know there's a provision in that agreement that, from my understanding, that once it expires, if they continue, the rate goes up. So it's like,
Mine is a moral question. Which
yeah,
is,
absolutely, no, I got you, absolutely.
Is the city of Atlanta said we're not gonna do this, they ended up doing it anyway. If you were on council, would you have voted yes or no?
I would have supported I would have supported to keep the detention center as our
So you
mayor.
would not have supported an intergovernmental agreement to provide jail beds?
At that time, no.
Okay, got it.
At that time, but but then also, at that time, no conditions,
Got it. So there's other roles, we could have conversations on ways that we could support that jail, but we should not have gone into that agreement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it. And if you were on council, you would not renew that agreement? Would you cut it off? Now, I mean, we're in the agreement, so we're there now.
Yeah,
So
absolutely,
now,
absolutely.
after it expires, would you
Yeah,
cut it off?
So I think for me, initially thinking about the agreement, I think my initial answer would be yes, but I'm gonna pull back a little bit because I also wanna know how that impacts the lives of those that are already, where we are currently, and I don't know those numbers, so
That's a question for Fulton County, right?
Exactly, yeah, so
It's
I
odd that
would,
the city is in the jailing business and it's not.
yeah, they was in the jail business before when it
Well, it
was a
shouldn't,
detention center, so.
but again, it goes back to public trust, right? We said we're having a baby, now we are.
So that's the thing that I would say, like, you asked me on the surface, yes, but I can't really give you a finite answer because I truly would want to know the impact of where things are now.
So
Where
what would
things are
make what would make you say we should keep leasing?
No, I would say, but.
Is there anything that would? I mean, because it seems like there's.
Because I would definitely want to know how many bed, what is being used, I'm gonna take a deeper step into understanding how are are we supporting those individuals now?
Beyond the bed.
Beyond those pieces. Because if those individuals, if we're truly doing the mental health space in the so what does that transition look like?
Yeah.
So that's just for me. It's not like I said on the surface. I think my initial answer would be not to, but I also want to understand what are all the spaces of what is the county solution? What is their solution to it now?
Last question.
You
So-
said two. You said two.
I said that was one, you know.
That was one with the
With your follow-up, and I had to follow up, and we had to follow up. Look, that's just happened, right? So this last piece is about budget. So, one of the things that is, my mother always said, like, if you want to know someone's
look at their budget.
priorities, let's look at their budget, right? I think that was dating advice, but I think that there's, that's also true, that's also true for governance, right? So if you wanna understand where people's priorities are, look at the budget.
Yeah.
This city, we have the opportunity to work with a bunch of organizations who focus on violence reduction,
Yes.
alternatives to policing,
Yeah.
things that are there. We have organizations that are not able to scale because they don't have the resources that are there. At the same time, this city's largest budget spending, $380 million, is on policing. Not policing alternatives, not policing training, on the institution of policing itself. My question is do you believe that the police budget, there's part A, part B, but do you believe that the police budget should stay the same? Do you believe it should increase, or do you believe that it should decrease?
I think the budget should reflect what the needs of the community are, what we need.
So if we said we need more policing alternatives,
Yes.
money needs to go there, should money divert from the police?
Yeah, absolutely.
fund? Okay, so
Absolutely.
we would reduce the police budget and increase preventative services?
Absolutely, if it is laid out like that,
Well, so let's take something like PAD.
Mhm.
Right now,
Yeah.
PAD doesn't advocate to do this because they would face retaliation, I'm sure, right? I'm not saying they did or didn't, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying that they would, right?
Yeah.
So they may say, well, we're gonna go raise money from outside, whatever it is, but I would argue, if you have policing alternatives, then the way to fund policing alternatives is to take the things that may not be working currently about our existing policing system, and then use it to fund things that demonstrably do work.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree.
So, when it comes to budgeting, and you're thinking about budgeting, how do you make those decisions, and where would you move money today if you had to in order to increase safety and justice for folks?
Yeah, so absolutely, I definitely think there's a need to invest more into pad our public alternative programs. Also, like I said, those restorative practices, more of those programs that really center on a community-based approach. The reason why I asked you in the budget question, because what people don't understand as well, a lot of times you just see the number, and I don't know this, so I'm not giving an answer to this, but you will see X amount of dollars for policing, and it automatically assumes that it's just for the police, but then oftentimes there are those departments and different programs.
Those programs often live under the executive office in the city of Atlanta.
Exactly, so
Not under the police department.
right, so then for PAD,
It's under the mayor's office.
it's under mayor's office, so then there will be a shift of the dollars there, and then of course you'll see decrease in the balance throughout the budget, so
why is this a difficult conversation sometimes on the I don't wanna make it a pro or anti-policing conversation, because that's not, it would take too long, and we'd have to bring a lot more people into this conversation. But really, when it comes down to budgeting, I think that there is this hesitation to say we should change or move anything, because the uncertainty and the unknown, and also to say that you're gonna take money from a police department starts to feel like defund, right? It's like, okay, well, you're gonna take money away, and all of a sudden, you're anti-police, or you're saving the community, but can we agree that, and I wonder your view on this, our approach to safety and justice in the city is not working. I mean, it doesn't mean that all of it's not working. It means that there are aspects of it that absolutely need reform and need to be changed. What aspects do you think need to be reformed
reformed and changed? And how do we have a more honest conversation about safety and justice in a city that is very uncomfortable with having that type of
Because we keep talking about it in us versus them.
It's a binary, right? It's a false binary.
We have to stop that, right? We keep talking about it in us versus them, a have or a have-nots, and a have and a have-not. And reality is that people's experience in this city when it comes to public safety it varies. It's different. But there is an overwhelming contingent of wanting a safe and healthy city. Like, we just hear it throughout. So I definitely think we have to take an approach of what are the different innovative ways of how we can actually build a solid, safe city that goes against the status quo, but also circumvents this us versus them and this kind of like this conflicting of is it defunding or reinvestment? Which why goes to my initial budget question. If we are looking at public safety as a true public safety, it's a mindset shift. I really do believe this. If we're looking at public safety in a holistic approach, you have the policing piece. So we know officers need to be trained differently. That was one of the reasons why APS branched off and we created our own safety and security department when we were, for many years, APD was our contract, you remember that was our contract, because we wanted our officers to be trained in handling conflict resolution and restorative practices and justice with our students differently. Right? And so it wasn't we were taken away, it was, we know this population of our city needs something different in terms of what safety entails. And that's what we need to be leaning into. And if we want to create and redesign that umbrella to have a police and alt pad underneath, restorative practices, training, more biased, culturally sensitive training, PD, whatever those pieces like, that's what we need to be looking at it as, and that's the lens that I look at it, so it doesn't feel like we're taking away from one, and taking away from one thing to another.
Bucket and Bankhead say the same thing about safety. They want to feel safe, they want to feel good in their communities, they don't want to, they want to be able to get from point A to point B, but when the resources are often deployed, like for example, when Buckhead said, we're going to secede, we're out of here because this place is too violent for us, whatever it might be. The city was like, we'll give you 3 police precincts. We're going to put, more policing efforts in this, and this. And communities in other parts of Atlanta were like, we've been talking about safety and justice for such a long time. We have not seen the movement of those dollars. For us, when we talk about safety, it's seen as threatening, and we need to get these folks like job training skills and this and that, but when somebody from Buckhead talks about, I want safety and justice, then it's like, let's do some institutional movement, let's move mass amounts of dollars. There just seems to be a discord. Like, we can't have midnight basketball in one place and then just say, okay, that's the safety and justice work that's gonna happen there. And then on the flip side say, okay, Buckhead, we're gonna get you 3 police precincts, we're gonna make sure that you have all the security that you've asked for. I mean, there's a disproportionate amount of resources that go from one city to another.
So I push back a little bit on that, because I also think you have to look at it, differently, but you're right in terms of this disproportionate piece.
More money goes to very specific neighborhoods that are usually not black, historically black neighborhoods, than any other type of neighborhood.
But that's not what I'm saying.
But I'm saying that if that's our reality, then
yeah, I got what you're saying. So that's not the angle I'm coming at. What I'm sharing is that the way public safety is playing, I think we're saying the same thing here. The way that public safety plays out in this city looks vastly different.
Yeah.
So Buckhead with the retail space and the epicenter there, but still there are police like the safety. What we're hearing on the south side is more trained officers, more safety perspective, more community-based approaches in that regards. And so I don't know where the conversation has been and leaning into that. What I can assure you, those are the things that I know that I will be bringing to the table and will be addressing and asking questions in terms of our public safety dialogue, period.
Yeah.
Because in that same example, somebody can construe it to be, oh, well, that's adding more or police. No, in other communities, my elderly community, that are like, they're so afraid to go out their homes, or they wanna make sure, they want officers to be responsive to their needs and also be trained to handle when someone is having a mental health crisis versus really being aggressive in a space.
Yeah.
So that's a level of, I would say, diversity, diversity in services and diversity in services and implementation that I haven't seen enough of. And that's where, I stand with the space of how can we truly build our public safety initiative as a city to truly be responsive to our community needs, where everyone is feeling, where we're all getting a baseline standard of service, but understanding what made our communities unique is how we're also being served, but also not being, militarized or policed in a way. And so that is the conversation and dialogue, and also the actionable steps and planning that I want to, that I'm looking forward to serving on and being able to move forward, because it is a reality throughout the city. It's not a cookie cutter approach. And so what's happening when we've taken a cookie cutter approach, it gets people in a space, well, you cookie cutter, but you gave them more high quality cookies over, here than on this side, versus what we truly need to just have. We do need to have a solid plan that doesn't mirror, it's just not.
Eshé, where can people learn more about you, your work, and your campaign?
They can visit www.collegeforatlanta.com. You can also feel free to give me a call at 404-931-4329, or you can send me an email at eshe@collegeforatlanta.com. Thank you.
Eshé, we're grateful for your time.
Absolutely.
We've taken a lot of it, but I
loved
hope
it.
this was a fruitful conversation. For those of you who are watching at home, we are publishing all of these. You can. Our goal here was to get an in-depth opportunity to not just get you with gotcha questions, but to have a real dialogue about where you stand on certain issues. We have a forum that is happening in October where you'll be able to continue to engage with these candidates. But the most important thing you can do is, if you've watched this and gone through all this, is go tell 5-10 people that there's an election happening in Atlanta and that it matters, because it does. And our job is not to just engage in election cycles, but to make sure that we hold folks accountable after them. So
thanks, Rohit. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love it.